I think everyone at this table deserves to know the truth about who really doesn't belong in this family. I placed the DNA test results face down on my mother-in-law's dining table, right between the roasted chicken and the mashed potatoes. 23 pairs of eyes locked onto that single white envelope like it was a bomb, which, in a way, it was. My sister-in-law, Victoria, went pale. For 6 years, she'd made it her personal mission to remind me at every family gathering that I wasn't really one of them, that I'd married into the Sterling family but would never truly belong, that my middle-class background, my public school education, my basic taste in everything from wine to furniture made me an outsider in their world of old money and older traditions. But the envelope on that table was about to prove that the real outsider had been sitting in the place of honor this entire time. "Emily, what are you doing?" my husband James whispered, his hand finding mine under the table. He knew. He'd been there when I opened the results 3 days ago, when everything we thought we knew about his family shattered like fine crystal. Victoria's perfectly manicured hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. "This is absurd. What kind of tacky stunt?" "Open it," I said quietly. 6 years of swallowed insults, backhanded compliments, and deliberate exclusion had led to this moment. Or I will. My mother-in-law, Catherine Sterling, looked between us with growing concern. Victoria's husband, Michael, had gone very still. The rest of the family, aunts, uncles, cousins, who'd watched Victoria tear me down at every holiday dinner, every birthday celebration, every casual Sunday brunch, leaned forward with expressions ranging from confusion to fascination. Victoria had spent 6 years building her throne on one fundamental claim. She was a Sterling by blood, born into the lineage, while I was just the girl from nowhere who'd happened to catch James's eye in college. She'd weaponized that distinction at every opportunity, made sure I never forgot that I'd married into privilege while she'd been born into it. But DNA doesn't lie, and the test results in that envelope proved something Victoria had hidden from everyone, maybe even from herself. She wasn't a Sterling by blood at all. 7 years ago, I was a junior at State University studying graphic design when James Sterling walked into my evening art class as a transfer student. He'd switched from his private East Coast college, wanting something more real, he'd said. We'd partnered on a project, and I'd fallen for his genuine kindness, his self-deprecating humor, the way he treated the campus coffee shop barista with the same respect he gave his professors. It took 3 months before he mentioned his family had money. Old money. Sterling Industries money. A manufacturing empire his great-grandfather had built in the 1920s. I'd Googled them after that conversation and felt my stomach drop. Mansions, charity galas, society pages. This was so far outside my world, I couldn't even see my world from there. "Does it matter?" James had asked when I'd expressed my concerns. "I love you. My family will love you. That's all that matters." He'd been half right. Catherine, my future mother-in-law, had been gracious when we first met. Reserved, formal, but not unkind. She'd asked about my family, my studies, my goals. I'd sensed her measuring me, calculating whether I was worthy of her son. But she'd ultimately welcomed me with cautious warmth. Victoria, however, had been a different story entirely. James's older brother, Richard, had died in a car accident 5 years before I entered the picture. His widow, Victoria, had remained close to the family, living in the guest house on the Sterling estate, maintaining her position as the beloved daughter-in-law, the keeper of Richard's memory. She and Richard had never had children, which seemed to make the family even more protective of her place in the Sterling legacy. Our first meeting was at a formal dinner 2 weeks before James proposed. I'd worn my best dress, a simple navy number from Macy's that I thought looked elegant. I'd felt confident walking in. That confidence lasted approximately 4 minutes. "Oh, how practical," Victoria had said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. She wore what I later learned was a vintage Chanel suit. James, she's adorable, like a little doll from a discount store. The table had gone quiet. James's jaw tightened. Victoria, it's a compliment, she'd laughed, touching my arm with fingers cold as ice. I just mean, she's so accessible, not at all pretentious, very girl next door. Catherine had cleared her throat. Victoria, perhaps we should— I'm just being welcoming, Victoria had insisted, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Emily, you must tell us about your family. James mentioned your father works in— was it plumbing? Construction, I'd corrected quietly. He's a project manager. Oh, how vital! We need people who work with their hands. Society couldn't function without the working class. I'd felt James's hand clench around his fork, but I'd smiled, swallowed the humiliation, and changed the subject. That night, James had apologized profusely. She's protective of the family. She'll warm up to you. She never did. Over the next 6 years, Victoria crafted an art form out of making me feel inferior. At our engagement party, she'd given a toast about keeping the sterling legacy strong through the generations, while pointedly looking everywhere except at me. At our wedding, she'd worn white. Not quite a wedding dress, but close enough to make a statement. She'd objected to several of my song choices as too common, and convinced Catherine to remove my parents from the receiving line because, traditionally, only the groom's family stands there in families like ours. Every holiday brought new, subtle cruelties. She'd organize Sterling family photo sessions and forget to call me. She'd plan girls' days with James's female cousins and his aunt, leaving me conspicuously uninvited. When I'd mention it to James, he'd confront her, and she'd act wounded. I thought Emily would be working. Or, I didn't want to bother her. She always seems so uncomfortable at our family things. Or, oh God, I'm so sorry. I'm just so used to it being blood family. I didn't think— That phrase, blood family. She used it constantly, like a weapon with my name engraved on it. At James's birthday dinner last year, she'd started a conversation about ancestry and heritage. It's so important to know where you come from, she'd said, looking directly at me. The Sterling lineage goes back 6 generations in this country. Catherine's side even further. That history, that bloodline, it means something. It shapes who we are. I'd excused myself to the bathroom and cried for 10 minutes. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago at Catherine's 65th birthday celebration. Victoria had organized the entire event, a garden party at the Sterling estate with 75 guests. She'd created a massive display, the Sterling family tree, a beautiful hand-painted genealogy going back 5 generations with photos of family members at every branch. Every member except me. 6 years of marriage to James, and I wasn't on the family tree. Not even a small photo or a line connecting me to James's branch. I was simply absent, erased, as if I didn't exist. When I'd pointed this out to Victoria, she'd laughed. Oh, Emily, this is a blood lineage tree. You married into the family. You're not part of the actual Sterling line. That would be biologically inaccurate. But you're on it, I'd said, my voice shaking. Right here, connected to Richard. Because I married a Sterling who was born a Sterling, she'd explained slowly, as if I were simple. Richard's blood was pure Sterling. Our theoretical children would have been blood Sterlings. You and James, well, your children will only be half, if that's something you even plan to do. The implication was clear. Maybe I shouldn't have children at all. Maybe I should save the Sterling bloodline from further dilution. James had found me crying in the estate garden an hour later, and for the first time in 6 years, I'd completely broken down. Every insult, every exclusion, every casual cruelty came pouring out. My husband had held me while I sobbed, and when I'd finally gone quiet, he'd said something I'd never forget. "She has no right to talk about blood and lineage like she's the keeper of it. She's not even—" He'd stopped abruptly. "Not even what?" "Nothing. She has no right to make you feel like this. Period." But that unfinished sentence haunted me. Not even what? That night, unable to sleep, I'd started Googling. Just curiosity at first. The Sterling family history. The genealogy Victoria was so proud of. I'd found articles about the family, society page mentions going back decades, business profiles of Sterling Industries through the generations. And then I'd found something odd. A newspaper announcement from 1985. Catherine and Thomas Sterling are pleased to announce that their nephew Richard, age 8, has come to live with them following the tragic passing of his parents, Thomas's brother David and sister-in-law Margaret Sterling. Richard had been raised by Catherine and Thomas, but he'd been born to Thomas's brother. I'd known that already. Victoria had mentioned it once, saying Richard had inherited the sterling brilliance from both sides of the family. But as I dug deeper, I found David Sterling's obituary. It mentioned his surviving son Richard, age 8. It also mentioned that Richard had been adopted. Adopted. My hands had started shaking as I searched for more. Birth records were harder to find, but after 3 hours of digging through ancestry websites and public records, I'd found it. Richard David Sterling, adopted by David and Margaret Sterling in 1978 when he was 14 months old. Original birth name, Richard Morrison. Parents, unknown. Richard had been adopted, which meant he wasn't a blood Sterling at all. He'd been brought into the family just like I'd been, through choice rather than birth. Which meant Victoria, who'd married him, had no Sterling blood either. And yet, she'd spent 6 years telling me I didn't belong because I lacked the bloodline she claimed made her family. I'd sat there at 3 a.m., staring at my laptop screen, feeling something between vindication and rage. Victoria had built her entire identity, her entire position in this family, on a lie. Maybe a lie she didn't even know she was telling. Richard might never have told her about his adoption. Or maybe she'd known and hidden it, using the Sterling name as armor while attacking me for not having what she didn't have either. I'd needed proof. Ironically, the same thing Victoria always demanded: blood proof. The DNA test had been surprisingly easy to arrange. I'd collected Victoria's DNA from a wine glass she'd left at a family dinner, carefully preserving it in a plastic bag. Then I'd asked Catherine to lunch, just the two of us, which rarely happened, and I'd been honest with her. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth," I'd said. "Was Richard adopted?" Catherine had gone very still, her teacup frozen halfway to her lips. The silence stretched for so long I'd thought she might not answer. Then, quietly, "Yes. How did you know?" I'd told her about my research, about the records I'd found, and then I'd told her about 6 years of Victoria's cruelty, all of it based on bloodline and belonging. Catherine had closed her eyes. "I failed you. I knew what she was doing, and I told myself she was just protective, grieving. I made excuses because confronting her felt too hard." "Did Victoria know Richard was adopted?" "I don't know," Catherine had admitted. "Richard knew, of course. David and Margaret were always honest with him about it. But whether he told Victoria, I don't know. After he died, it didn't seem to matter anymore." "It matters now," I'd said. "Catherine, I need your DNA to run a comparison test. I need proof that Victoria has no more Sterling blood than I do. I need her to stop using something she doesn't even have as a weapon against me." My mother-in-law had looked at me for a long moment. then nodded. You'll have it. And Emily, I'm sorry. You deserved better from all of us. The results had come back 3 days ago. 0% genetic match between Victoria and Catherine. Victoria had no sterling DNA whatsoever. She was connected to this family purely through marriage, exactly like me. The difference was, I'd never pretended otherwise. Now, sitting at this family dinner with that envelope on the table, watching Victoria's face cycle through confusion, anger, and dawning fear, I felt 6 years of silence finally breaking. This is a DNA comparison test, I said clearly, my voice steady for the first time in years at a Sterling family gathering. Between Victoria and Catherine. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Michael, Victoria's husband, leaned forward. What? Why would you? Because, I continued, looking directly at Victoria. For 6 years, you've told me I don't belong in this family because I don't have Sterling blood. You've made family trees without me. You've excluded me from blood family events. You've made sure everyone at this table knows that you're a real Sterling and I'm just someone who married in. Victoria's face had gone from pale to flushed. This is insane. Catherine, are you going to let her? Open it, Victoria, Catherine said quietly. All eyes turned to her. Or I'll tell everyone what it says myself. The table went silent. You could have heard a pin drop onto the antique Persian rug. Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for the envelope. This is a violation of my privacy. This is the truth, I finished. Something you've spent 6 years hiding from. Maybe even from yourself. She tore open the envelope with shaking fingers. Her eyes scanned the results, the complex genetic markers, the percentage matches, the clear conclusion at the bottom. I watched her face as she read it, as the reality sank in. 0% match. No shared DNA. No biological connection whatsoever. This is wrong, she whispered. This has to be wrong. Richard was adopted, Catherine said, her voice gentle but firm. My brother-in-law and his wife adopted him when he was 14 months old. They loved him completely, raised him as their own. When they died, Thomas and I took him in. He was family in every way that mattered. But biologically, Victoria, he wasn't a Sterling by blood. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria looked around the table, her eyes wild, landing on faces that showed varying degrees of shock. Some family members clearly had known, a few aunts and uncles old enough to remember, but most of James's generation hadn't. The cousins, the younger relatives, they were staring at Victoria like they'd never seen her before. You knew? Victoria's voice broke as she looked at Catherine. You knew this whole time and you let me… I didn't know you were using it as a weapon, Catherine said quietly. I didn't know you were making Emily feel like an outsider because of bloodline. Richard never made those distinctions. He never treated family as tiers of belonging. I didn't realize you'd built your entire identity on something that wasn't real. Victoria's laugh was bitter, bordering on hysterical. Is that what you were going to say? That my connection to this family wasn't real? No, I said, and everyone turned to me. Your connection was real. Your marriage was real. Your love for Richard was real. The years you spent as part of this family were real. But Victoria, don't you see? You proved exactly what I've been trying to tell you for 6 years. Family isn't about blood. It never was. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face now. You belonged here because Richard loved you, I continued, my voice soft but steady. Because Catherine and Thomas welcomed you. Because you chose to be part of this family and they chose you back. Not because of DNA. Not because of some genetic test or family tree bloodline, because of love and choice and commitment. I stood up, still holding James's hand. The same things that make me family. I belong here because James loves me, because I love him, because I've chosen this family and worked every day for 6 years to be part of it, despite you doing everything possible to push me out. Victoria was sobbing now, her hands covering her face. Michael had put his arm around her, his own expression stunned. The irony, I said, is that you had every right to be here. You still do. But you spent 6 years telling me I didn't belong because of something that you didn't have either. You made up rules about bloodline and heritage and legacy, rules that excluded you as much as they excluded me. You just didn't know it. James stood up beside me. Victoria, you owe Emily an apology. Not just for tonight. For 6 years of making her feel like she wasn't enough. For all the comments, the exclusions, the casual cruelties that you thought were justified because of some imaginary biological superiority. I didn't, Victoria started, but her voice died. Because she had. Everyone at that table knew she had. Catherine rose from her seat at the head of the table. I owe Emily an apology too. I watched this happen and I didn't stop it. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that you two would work it out. But Victoria, you needed to be stopped years ago. And Emily, you deserved to be defended. She walked around the table and took my hands. You are family. Blood has nothing to do with it. I should have made that clear from the beginning. I felt tears burning in my eyes, but for the first time in 6 years, they weren't tears of humiliation or pain. They were relief. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. I can't. I need to. She turned and fled from the dining room, her heels clicking rapidly across the marble floor. Michael hesitated, looked at me with something like apology in his eyes, then followed her. The remaining family members sat in stunned silence for a long moment. Then James's Aunt Margaret, the one who'd organized several of those blood family-only events at Victoria's urging, spoke up quietly. Emily, I owe you an apology as well. We all do. We let this happen. One by one, family members nodded, murmured agreements, offered their regrets. It wasn't a complete healing. 6 years of exclusion couldn't be undone in one evening, but it was a start. As James and I drove home that night, my hand in his, I felt something shift inside me. The weight I'd been carrying, the constant feeling of being judged, of not being enough, of being an outsider in my own husband's family, had lifted. I'm proud of you, James said quietly. I know that wasn't easy. It was 6 years overdue, I replied. He squeezed my hand. I should have done more. Should have stood up to her harder, made my family see what she was doing. I'm sorry. We both could have done things differently, I said. But maybe this was how it had to happen. Maybe Victoria needed to face the truth about herself before anything could change. 4 months have passed since that dinner. The changes haven't been dramatic or overnight, but they've been real. Victoria stayed away from family gatherings for 6 weeks. During that time, Catherine arranged for her to speak with a therapist, a condition of her continued inclusion in family events. When she finally returned, she looked different, smaller somehow, less armored. The first words out of her mouth were directed at me. Emily, I owe you an apology, a real one, not one forced by circumstances. We'd been in Catherine's sitting room, just the family members who'd been at that fateful dinner. Victoria sat across from me, her hands twisted in her lap, a gesture of vulnerability I'd never seen from her before. I've spent the last month and a half in therapy trying to understand why I did what I did, she continued, her voice quiet. Why I made you my target for 6 years. Why I needed so badly to make you feel small. She took a shaky breath. The truth is, from the moment I met you, you terrified me. You were everything I wasn't. Genuine, comfortable in your own skin, clearly loved by James for exactly who you were. You didn't need the sterling name to have value. You didn't need the money or the status or the legacy. You were enough, all by yourself. I stayed quiet, letting her speak. When Richard died, I lost my identity. I didn't know who Victoria Sterling was without him. So I clung to the family name, to the idea of bloodline and legacy, because it was all I had left. And then you came along, and you reminded me that none of that mattered. That family is about love and choice, and I hated you for it. Tears were running down her face now. I made you the villain in my story because I couldn't face that I was the villain in yours. I turned you into the outsider so I could feel like I belonged. And the most horrible irony is that we were the same. Both of us connected to this family through marriage, through choice. I just couldn't see it. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time in 6 years. I don't expect you to forgive me. What I did was cruel and unforgivable. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. And I'm going to spend however long it takes working to be better. I'd sat with her words for a long moment, feeling James's presence beside me, Catherine's gentle attention across the room. Then I'd spoken the truth I'd discovered over the past 6 weeks. Victoria, I don't know if we'll ever be friends. The hurt runs pretty deep, but I believe you can change. I believe people are more than the worst things they've done, so I'm willing to try if you are. Her face had crumpled with relief. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. Maybe, I'd agreed, but it's what family does. And whether you have sterling DNA or not, you are family. You just needed to learn what that actually means. Now, 4 months later, things are different. Victoria is quieter at family gatherings, more careful with her words. She asks me questions about my life, my work, my thoughts, actually listens to the answers. Last month, she invited me to lunch, just the two of us, and we had the first genuine conversation we'd ever had. She's still working through her issues with identity and belonging. I can see the struggle sometimes, when old habits try to resurface. But she catches herself now, apologizes when she slips. We're not close, maybe we never will be, but there's respect between us now. Understanding. A recognition that we were both fighting for the same thing, to belong, and that the fight itself was unnecessary. Catherine has changed too. She's more present now, more intentional about including everyone. Last week, she presented me with a revised family tree, one that showed marriages as equal connections, that included spouses' names in the same font and prominence as blood relatives. This is what I should have insisted on from the beginning, she'd said. Family trees that only show biology miss the most important parts of family. James's cousin Rachel organized a Sterling Women's Weekend last month and made a point of inviting me first. No more blood family nonsense, she'd said. We're all choosing to be here. That's what matters. The aunts who'd participated in Victoria's exclusions have made individual efforts to connect with me. It's awkward sometimes, but it's genuine. They're trying. That's more than I had before. And yesterday, James and I announced to the family that I'm pregnant. The room had erupted in celebration. Genuine, unqualified joy. Catherine had cried and hugged me tightly, whispering, "This baby is going to be so loved, so absolutely wanted and cherished." But the moment that surprised me most was Victoria. She'd approached me after the chaos had died down, her eyes bright with tears. "Congratulations, Emily. Truly. You're going to be an amazing mother." "Thank you," I'd said, meaning it. She'd hesitated, then, "When I said your children would only be half sterling, that was possibly the cruelest thing I said to you. And I want you to know your baby is 100% family. No fractions, no qualifications. Just family. The real kind." I'd felt tears prick my eyes. "I know. Thank you for saying it, though." As she walked away, James had wrapped his arms around me from behind, his hands resting on my still flat stomach. "You did this," he'd murmured. "You changed everything." "We did this," I'd corrected. "All of us. Even Victoria. Especially Victoria." Because the truth is, Victoria needed to shatter before she could rebuild into someone better. And maybe I needed to stop accepting scraps before I could demand the respect I deserved. This morning, I sat in Catherine's garden for her regular Sunday brunch, the family tradition I'd attended for 6 years while feeling like a ghost at the table. But today was different. Today, when I spoke, people listened. When I laughed, they laughed with me, not at me. When I shared my thoughts on the nursery we were planning, everyone leaned in with genuine interest and suggestions. Victoria was there too, sitting across the table, and when our eyes met, she gave me a small smile. Not the sharp, predatory smile I'd learned to fear, but something real and a little sad, an acknowledgement of what was lost and what might still be built. Catherine raised her mimosa glass. "To family," she said, looking around the table. "The one we're born into, the one we marry into, the one we choose. May we never confuse biology with belonging." "To family," everyone echoed, glasses raised. James's hand found mine under the table, squeezed gently. I looked around at the faces surrounding me, some I'd known for 6 years, all of them finally seeing me clearly, seeing all of us clearly. I'd walked into this family as an outsider, been treated like an impostor, and had to fight to prove that I belonged. In the end, I discovered something Victoria took 6 years and a DNA test to learn. Family was never about the blood running through your veins. It was about the love you chose to give and the respect you earned by showing up, again and again, even when it hurt. It was about building something together that was stronger than genetics or legacy or any name on a document. The Sterlings weren't my family because I'd married James. They were my family because I'd chosen them, fought for them, and finally, they'd chosen me back. And the baby growing inside me would enter a family that had learned, the hard way, what family actually meant. Not bloodlines or heritage or who belonged to whom. Just love. Imperfect, hard-won, absolutely real love. That was legacy enough for any child. That was everything that mattered. Victoria caught my eye again across the table, raised her glass slightly in my direction. A private acknowledgement between two women who'd both learned the same painful lesson from opposite sides. I raised my glass back. Not forgiveness, not quite yet, but possibility, understanding, a recognition that we'd both grown into people we hadn't been before. And maybe, in the end, that was the real family legacy. Not the DNA passed down through generations, but the lessons learned, the growth achieved, the courage to face uncomfortable truths and become better because of them. I placed my hand on my stomach, imagining the tiny life inside. This child would grow up knowing they belonged, not because of genetics, but because they were wanted, chosen, loved without conditions or qualifications. They'd grow up in a family that had learned, through pain and confrontation and difficult truths, that belonging wasn't inherited, It was earned, built, chosen. And that made it so much more valuable than blood ever could.